Hey everyone, and welcome back to Standing in the Gaps News Deep Dive. As always, we're, no spin, no agenda,
Just the facts.
just trying to, get you the information you need to form your own opinions.
Right.
And today, we are diving into something that's got everyone talking.
Yeah.
President Trump's plan for a new government agency called the External Revenue Service, or ERS.
It's a mouthful.
It is. It's definitely raising eyebrows,
Yeah.
especially since it comes alongside his plans for a Department of Government Efficiency. It seems a bit contradictory, doesn't it?
Yeah. You'd think with the Department of Government Efficiency, you'd be looking to shrink the size of government.
Right. Exactly.
Add a whole other agency.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's lay out what we know from Trump's Truth Social announcement.
Okay.
He says the ERS will collect tariffs duties
Yeah.
and other revenue from foreign sources, essentially making those who make money off of us pay their fair share.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that actually mean in practice? And who's really going to be paying?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, we've got some strong opinions already brewing.
Yeah.
Senator Ron Wyden, for example. He's not buying it. He's calling it a silly rebranding.
Oh, really?
Yeah, basically saying it's a sneaky way to hike taxes on Americans.
Which is a pretty serious accusation.
It is.
But I can see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
If the ERS is all about tariffs,
Right.
and tariffs often get passed down to consumers in the form of higher prices,
Mm-hmm.
well, it doesn't take an economics degree to see how that could play out.
Exactly. But it's also worth considering the other side of the argument, right? There are some economists, particularly on the conservative side, who've been advocating for shifting the tax burden away from domestic income. So for them, the ERS might actually seem like a step in the right direction.
Okay. So we've got this fundamental tension right out of the gate.
Right.
Is the ERS about fairness to Americans, as Trump claims, or is it a veiled tax hike?
Yeah.
To really understand what's going on, we need to unpack how tariffs actually work.
Let's do that. So at its most basic, a tariff is a tax on goods imported from another country.
Okay.
Think of it like a surcharge that gets added to the price.
Right.
The goal is to make imported goods more expensive and encourage people to buy American-made products instead.
Okay, so that's the idea, but what happens in reality? Who really ends up footing the bill for these tariffs?
Well, Erica York from the Tax Foundation breaks it down pretty clearly. It's usually U.S. importers who pay the tariffs up front to Customs and Border Protection, and then they've got a few choices. Eat the cost, try to haggle with the foreign supplier for a lower price, or, and this is the most likely scenario, pass that cost on to you, the consumer, through higher prices.
So that new TV or those imported shoes you've been eyeing,
Right.
suddenly they're not such a bargain.
Exactly. And that's why people like Senator Wyden are crying foul. They're saying this whole ERS thing is just a roundabout way to raise taxes disguised as something else.
And if we connect this to Trump's other big initiative,
Yes.
the Department of Government Efficiency,
Mm-hmm.
led by Elon Musk, it gets even more perplexing. The DOGE is all about streamlining government, but creating a whole new agency doesn't exactly scream efficiency, does it?
Not at first glance. And this is where those potential economic consequences of tariffs come into play. Let's not forget that during his campaign, Trump floated some pretty hefty tariff proposals. We're talking 10–20% across the board, even a 60% tariff on Chinese goods.
Wow.
He even threatened a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico.
Whoa, those are some big numbers. But wouldn't those tariffs bring in a ton of revenue for the ERS, allowing Trump to fund his tax cuts and other plans?
That's what he's banking on. But economists are ringing alarm bells.
Oh, really?
They're warning about the inefficiency of tariffs as a long-term revenue source. Plus, there's the risk of retaliatory tariffs from other countries leading to a trade war.
Oh.
And as we've already discussed, the biggest potential losers in a trade war are often consumers like you.
Right, so higher prices, economic instability, maybe even a trade war. It sounds like the stakes are pretty high here.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we'll get deeper into all of this in the next part of our deep dive.
Before we get there, though, let's take a quick break to hear a message from our sponsor. Your support helps us keep this deep dive going, so be sure to check them out.
Do you believe in standing strong for what's right? Do you value faith, freedom, and biblical truth in today's ever-changing world? Then we've got something special for you. Welcome to the Standing in the Gaps merch store, the official store of the Standing in the Gaps podcast, where we explore the social, economic, and political issues of today through a biblical lens. Here's what we've got for you. T-shirts that help you make a bold statement everywhere you go. Whether you're standing up for truth or sparking conversations, our shirts reflect the spirit of standing in the gap. Need fuel for those long, thoughtful mornings or deep dive discussions? We've got premium coffee, roasted to perfection, along with sturdy mugs designed to hold that truth-fueled brew. Want to represent your values wherever life takes you? Grab one of our stylish hats to keep you covered, literally and figuratively. And don't miss our inspirational prints that you can frame and hang up at home or in your office. A daily reminder to stand firm in faith. But that's not all. From accessories to gifts, we've got a variety of items that let you stand out while standing strong for what you believe in. Every purchase supports the mission of Standing in the Gaps, helping us continue bringing you insightful content, meaningful conversations, and the courage to face the tough topics. So what are you waiting for? Visit Standing in the Gaps merch store today. Link is in the description. Grab some gear, enjoy some great coffee, and help us keep bridging the gap in today's world. Together, let's stand for truth. Together, let's stand in the gap.
We're back.
We are back. So before the break, we were talking about the potential economic fallout from Trump's tariff proposals and how that ties into this whole ERS idea.
Right, and we left off with economists basically saying, hold on a second, this might not be such a good idea. But even if we set those economic concerns aside for a moment, there's another big question hanging over all of this. Can Trump even legally create this new agency?
That's a great point, and it takes us into some pretty dense legal territory.
Oh.
To simplify things a bit, setting up a whole new federal agency typically requires congressional approval.
Right.
And while the Republicans control Congress right now,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean they're going to rubber stamp everything Trump wants.
So even with a Republican Congress, there could be pushback debates. Maybe even some folks within his own party who aren't on board with the ERS.
Absolutely. And then there's the potential for legal challenges, especially around whether the ERS would be constitutional.
Okay.
The Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. So you could argue that creating an agency to collect revenue from foreign trade falls under that umbrella.
But I have a feeling it's not that simple.
You're right, it's not. Critics are already saying the ERS could step on the toes of existing agencies like the Treasury Department or Customs and Border Protection.
Oh.
You could end up with turf wars and lawsuits, which would make the whole thing even messier.
So even if Trump manages to get the ERS up and running, there's a good chance it could get bogged down in legal battles for years.
It's definitely a possibility. And this all ties back to a fundamental principle of American government.
Okay.
Checks and balances. Even a president who's known for making bold moves can't just do whatever he wants. There are processes and procedures in place, and those can slow things down considerably.
Okay, so we've got potential economic risks, potential legal challenges, and all of this is playing out against a backdrop of intense political division. It feels like the ERS is this lightning rod for all sorts of anxieties people have about the economy, globalization, the role of government. It's a lot.
It really is. And that's why we're taking the time to really break all of this down for you. Because at the end of the day, what matters most is how this could impact you, our listeners.
Exactly. So let's get down to brass tacks. What does the ERS actually mean for people's wallets? We've talked about tariffs in general.
Right.
But how might this play out in your everyday life?
If Trump's vision for the ERS comes to pass and tariffs become a major source of government revenue, you're likely going to see higher prices on a lot of the things you buy.
Okay.
Think about it. Groceries, clothes, electronics, cars, if those tariffs go up as much as Trump has suggested, your cost of living could increase significantly.
And it's not just about the direct cost of goods, right?
Yeah.
There's a ripple effect.
Right. If tariffs lead to trade wars, as some economists fear, it could disrupt global supply chains. That could mean shortages of certain products or even longer wait times.
Oh.
And when things are scarce, prices tend to go up even more.
So it's not just a matter of paying a few extra bucks here and there. This could have a real impact on people's budgets and their overall financial well-being.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to stay informed and to think critically about what you're hearing.
Right.
Don't just take things at face value.
Right.
Dig deep, look at the evidence, and ask yourself, who benefits from this? Who might be harmed?
Great advice. We here at Standing in the Gaps News always encourage you to engage with the content, share your thoughts, and keep the conversation going.
Yes.
If you're enjoying this deep dive, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis. Now, before we wrap up, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about some of the speculation surrounding this whole ERS thing. One thing that's been bugging me is the name itself, External Revenue Service.
Feels very deliberate, almost like a mirror image of the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS.
It's definitely a choice, isn't it? And it's
Yeah.
hard not to see it as a kind of rhetorical strategy.
Yeah.
It's almost like Trump is saying, look, we've got an agency to collect taxes from Americans, and now we need one to collect from those outside the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
It creates a sense of symmetry, but as we've discussed, the reality of tariffs is far more complex.
No, it's clever branding, for sure.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much the name itself will influence public perception of the ERS. Will people see it as legitimate, or will they be more skeptical?
That's a question for the pollsters and social media analysts, I suppose.
Right.
But one thing that adds to the skepticism is the lack of concrete details about the ERS.
Mm-hmm. Trump announced it with a lot of fanfare, but he's been pretty vague on the specifics.
Yeah, we still don't know much about how it would be structured, how much it would cost, who would run it, or even what its powers would be. It's all very much up in the air.
Which leads to a lot of speculation.
Yeah.
Some people think the ERS might end up being part of the Treasury Department, while others believe it'll be a completely independent agency. There's even talk of Trump using executive orders to bypass Congress and just create the ERS by fiat.
Wow. But at this point, it's all just guesswork. We'll have to wait and see what concrete steps Trump takes in the coming weeks.
Right.
And we'll be here to break it all down for you.
Speaking of breaking things down, there's another piece of this puzzle that we need to address. The connection between the ERS and Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE.
Right. On the surface, they seem to be at odds with each other. How can you create a whole new agency while simultaneously trying to streamline government?
It's definitely a head-scratcher.
Yeah.
But there are some folks out there who think the ERS could actually make the government more efficient in the long run.
Okay.
Their argument is that by shifting the focus of revenue collection away from domestic taxes and towards tariffs, you could potentially shrink the IRS.
Interesting. It's an interesting theory, but it's highly speculative.
It is.
And there are plenty of people who believe the ERS would just add another layer of bureaucracy, making the government even more complex and inefficient.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got competing theories about efficiency, unanswered questions about structure and powers, and a whole lot of uncertainty about what this all means for the economy, and we haven't even touched on the political firestorm this is creating.
Right. Let's not forget that the ERS is incredibly divisive.
Yeah.
Democrats are almost unanimously against it, seeing it as a backdoor way to raise taxes on working families.
It's a classic example of how a policy proposal can become a battleground for deeper ideological conflicts. It's not just about tariffs. It's about globalization, the role of government, and fundamentally different visions for the future of the American economy.
And that makes it even more crucial for you, our listeners, to understand what's at stake and to engage in thoughtful discussion about these issues. We want to hear what you think. Leave a comment below and tell us your perspective on the ERS.
We love hearing from our engaged and informed audience. And if you're enjoying this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe for more insightful content like this. We're committed to bringing you the facts without any spin so you can form your own opinions. Now, we've covered a lot of ground here in part 2, but there's still much more to explore. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll look ahead to the future and consider the different scenarios that could play out as this whole ERS saga unfolds. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has. We've covered so much: ground tariffs, trade wars, constitutional law, economic theories, you name it.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around. But now it's time to put on our future predicting hats and try to look ahead.
You're right.
What are some of the potential scenarios that could unfold with this ERS proposal?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, it's really hard to say with any certainty because so much depends on, political calculations, legal challenges, and even global economic trends.
So many factors.
So many factors.
But that doesn't mean we can't speculate a little, right?
Of course not.
Based on what we've discussed so far, I can see a few possibilities. One, the ERS gets completely scrapped.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. If Congress pushes back hard enough or if the legal challenges just prove to be too much, Trump might be forced to abandon the whole thing.
It would be a blow to his agenda for sure.
It would.
But it's not like he hasn't, changed course on policies before.
Yeah, exactly. And in that case, the ERS would just become another example of a bold idea that couldn't quite survive the realities of Washington.
Right. Okay, so scenario 1, scrap scenario 2, the ERS gets watered down.
Okay.
It gets implemented, but in a much more limited form than what Trump initially envisioned.
Right. Maybe it ends up as, just a small division within the Treasury Department, or its powers are significantly curtailed by Congress.
So it's there, but it's not really doing what he wanted it to do.
Exactly. It might not have the dramatic impact on trade and the economy that some are predicting. It would be more of a symbolic victory for Trump rather than a substantive one.
Okay, and then there's the third scenario, the one that probably keeps economists up at night.
Uh-oh.
The ERS gets implemented pretty much as Trump wants it, with a broad mandate and a hefty budget.
Now, that would be a game changer, wouldn't it?
Oh, it'd be huge.
We could see a significant shift in U.S. trade policy, with a much heavier reliance on tariffs to generate revenue.
Which, as we've discussed, could lead to higher prices for consumers, retaliation from other countries, and potentially even a full-blown trade war.
It's a risky gamble, to say the least, but it's one that Trump seems willing to take.
So those are our three broad scenarios: scrapped, watered down, or full steam ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But even within those scenarios, there are still so many unanswered questions.
Oh, absolutely. For instance, if the ERS does get implemented, how will it actually work in practice? What will its organizational structure look like? How will it coordinate with other agencies like the IRS and Customs and Border Protection?
Yeah, and what about oversight? Will Congress have sufficient control over the ERS to prevent abuse or overreach?
These are crucial questions.
Very important.
That need to be addressed.
And then there are the economic questions.
Yeah.
How effectively will the ERS be able to collect revenue from tariffs? Will it be enough to offset the potential losses from, reduced trade?
And how will businesses and consumers adapt to a world with higher tariffs on imported goods? Will it lead to a resurgence in American manufacturing, or will it simply make everyday products more expensive for everyone?
Right. It's so complicated. There are so many moving pieces here.
It really is.
These are complex issues with no easy answers. And the truth is, we won't know the full impact of the ERS for years, maybe even decades to come.
It's a long game.
It is. It's a reminder that policy decisions made today can have ripple effects far into the future, often in ways that are very difficult to predict.
Absolutely. Which is why it's so important to stay informed, engage in these thoughtful debates, and hold our leaders accountable for the choices they make.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's what we're all about here at Standing in the Gaps News. We're not here to tell you what to think,
Nope.
but rather to equip you with the knowledge and context you need to form your own informed opinions.
If you've enjoyed this deep dive, we encourage you to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future deep dives.
And while you're at it, why not leave a comment and let us know your thoughts on the ERS? We really do love hearing from you, our engaged and informed audience.
We do. And speaking of support, we wanted to take a moment to mention our GoFundMe campaign.
Yes, our listeners are the reason we do what we do, and every little bit helps us to improve our content and reach a wider audience.
With your help, we can invest in better equipment like webcams, studio microphones, editing computers.
All that good stuff that helps make the show sound and look better.
Exactly. So if you appreciate what we do and want to see us grow, please consider making a donation. Your support means the world to us.
And on that note, we want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into President-elect Trump's External Revenue Service. It's been a fascinating and, I would say, very important conversation.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.